Hey everyone, it's Ed here. Essentially, this is just a little preamble to say that we don't really think that this episode, despite being the first one we're posting again for over a year and a half, we don't really think it's up to snuff. Essentially, my mic was in the wrong place in the room, and you hear these horrible reflections in my voice. They're probably not going to sound so bad on a kind of standard pair of earphones, but if you're listening on speakers or anything like that, your speakers are going to sound bad. I know, hilarious, it's busted speakers. This is going on for way too long, so I'll just say that if you think this episode's kind of weak, we're really sorry. We kind of just wanted to get this out there and get the ball rolling again, and we've recorded a bunch of episodes since that sound a hell of a lot better, and I've just improved my acoustics in my room as well, so it's going to sound even better in future. So I hope you enjoy the episode, and I'll catch you guys later. Welcome to Busted Speakers. It sure has been a while since we last blessed your ears, but we're back. If you're a long-time listener to the show, you might be wondering who is talking now. I'm Ed, and I'll be presenting this episode. But I'm also joined by Alex, who I think has been on every episode so far. Is that right, Alex?
More or less, I'd say.
And we're also joined by Cam, who people who've been listening to the podcast since its inception might be familiar with.
That's me.
So, yeah, we're back, and we'll hopefully have a more steady stream of content on the way. But for now, we just kind of wanted to sit down and review a few albums, starting with this one, the new album from Antarctigo Vespucci, which is titled Love in the Time of Email. So Antarctigo Vespucci are a band that is comprised of two really great singer-songwriters, Chris Farren of the band Fake Problems, or formerly of the band Fake Problems, and Jeff Rosenstock, formerly of Bomb the Music Industry. What I thought was really interesting about this band, because I've heard Chris Farren's solo material, and I've heard Jeff Rosenstock's solo material. I quite like Chris Farren. I absolutely adore Jeff Rosenstock. Listen to his music all the time, whether it be his solo stuff or Bomb the Music Industry. But I kind of hadn't heard of this particular band until this new album came out, and I was surprised to find out that they actually formed Antarctigo Vespucci before Jeff and Chris's solo careers really got started, but after the bands that they were most famous for being in had split up. Those two bands had supported each other on tours, so Fake Problems and Bomb the Music Industry. But outside of that, the two guys didn't really know each other. So they both came together to do some collaborative songwriting and recording, and something just clicked, and now we have Antarctigo Vespucci. But I think this particular album, this is like their first proper studio effort. I don't necessarily know if it was recorded professionally, but I've listened back to some of their older stuff, and it's a lot more rough than this, so this is definitely a good first project to go into.
Yeah, so like Ed, I'm a pretty big fan of Jeff Rosenstock. Only of his solo material, though. I've heard his three most recent albums. I'm a big fan of him based on those, and from Ed's recommendation solely, I checked this out, and I had no clue who the Chris Farren member was, but I've warmed to Chris Farren, who is pretty much the main vocalist of this whole album. I think Jeff does sometimes some significant backing vocals here and there, but Chris basically does all the main vocals. Overall, I really, really, really enjoyed this. This had so many catchy, infectious melodies, amazing, snappy instrumentation. A lot of the time I was just blown away by their just sheer energy of the performances here. And Chris Farren conveys a lot with his voice, and Jeff really good here too. In fact, I don't know exactly what instrumental roles he played for the majority of this. I'm guessing guitar as he did in the solo material, but I've listened 3 times and it's been a good time each time. One listened really intently, and I've had it in the background as well, and it really works well for both. So I had a really good time with this album. I definitely loving the time of email. So yeah. So what were your thoughts on this, Cam?
I've never heard of the band, and I think I've only ever heard of Rosenstock in passing, like just seeing his name on like year-end lists or that sort of thing. And I've never heard of Chris Farren. And yeah, I really liked it. I can't say I listened to it very intensely either time, just because of my own circumstances. But I've heard it about twice now, and it definitely seems like something that I would really love when I sit down and, give it a good amount of attention. Really seems like something I could really delve into the lyrics and appreciate them. I'm always on the lookout for great power pop, especially, modern stuff, because bizarrely, I think a lot of older power pop just doesn't really work for me for one reason or another, but anything from like maybe the late 90s on to now, when it's good, I think it's some of my favorite music, and this album really struck a lot of the right chords for me. Like, it feels kind of like a modern rumination on technology of the past and present, and it definitely has a very strong 90s vibe. Like, I could really hear some of these songs being played on like a 90s nostalgia station or something like that, and I just love that kind of thing.
I really liked this album as well. This is really strange because I really like Jeff Rosenstock, and I think Chris Farren's solo album, which is called Can't Die, although he also has a Christmas album randomly of completely original material, which I haven't heard.
Yeah, I saw that. It looked really interesting. It even has Sean Burnett from Andrew Jackson Jihad featuring on a few tracks.
Yeah, so I should probably check that out. I did actually hear one song from that particular record recently because I saw Jeff Rosenstock live in Manchester with Chris Farren supporting. For some bizarre reason, they didn't play any material together, so I still hadn't heard Antarctigo at that point. But when I heard that they had a new record coming out, I was like, okay, I'll check this out. But in the meantime, I was listening to Chris Farren's solo album, and I like it. I don't love it like I love a ton of Jeff's material. And from the single for this album, the track White Noise, I had found that Chris sings the songs here. And you were mentioning, Alex, that you're not sure what capacity either member has outside of what's really apparent. So it's obvious that Jeff plays a lot of guitar on this album, and Chris is the main vocalist. There's the odd moment where Jeff sings as well, but I actually have a theory why they don't sing together a lot, which is kind of a nerdy music theory thing, but it's sort of an explanation as to why that's the case. But regardless, I was kind of wondering how much I would really like this album, because I think Chris's material is pretty good. Jeff's material is fantastic. I thought the single was fairly good, pretty catchy, quite standard 2-minute power pop jam.
Yeah.
Really hooky. As you mentioned, Alex, this album is catchy as all hell. White Noise is the least of it, and that song still gets stuck in my head, so...
Oh yeah, I've got loads of just hooks and choruses and parts of this I've just got stuck in my head every time for about hours after I've listened to it.
Yeah. But my main point with this whole diatribe is I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about it, and I really, really like this album. I was really... I don't want to say pleasantly surprised, as if I was expecting something bad, but I'm really surprised the heights that some of the material on here reaches. And obviously we'll get into individual tracks later, but as a whole, I think this is a really great sort of concentration of the best parts of Chris's material and the best parts of Jeff's material melded together. And then also, particularly in the second half of the record, they'll delve into genres that you wouldn't really hear on either of their solo albums, which I thought was pretty great. And yeah, it's just a really catchy album. It's a really brisk 35-minute listen. It really embodies a lot of what the great 90s power pop that Cam mentioned, makes the genre so appealing. It was Jeff and maybe Weezer's earliest material that really made me turn a new leaf on pop punk and power pop and all that kind of saccharine rock music that I used to think not a whole lot of. And loving The Time of Email, it's a great addition to that catalogue. I enjoy it just as much as Jeff's album from this year, which was Post. I probably enjoy both these albums about the same, and I honestly wasn't expecting to. So, thumbs up from me.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you there that I'd have to say I prefer this to Post by Jeff.
Oh, wow.
Maybe it's because it's so instantly in your face, just catchy melodies, full force. Like, especially because the first half is so exceptional here. And Post, okay, maybe there's a few songs on that I prefer to the best here, like 9 out of 10 in USA.
Yeah.
But as a whole, honestly, the songwriting and musicianship here, especially considerably in the first half, it's just exceptional. It's like perfect blasts of music, power pop, like you guys were saying. It's so endearing and just enjoyable to me. I just love this stuff.
Man, it's nothing but positivity on the comeback of Busted Speakers.
I know, I mean, are we always going to be like this? Who knows? Probably not.
I've got to say about the songwriting on this album, I feel like the lyrical side of things is a lot closer to Chris's material, whereas the instrumental side of things is a lot closer to Jeff's.
Right.
On tracks like Kimmy, you'll get these blasts of horns during the chorus that really reminds me of Bomb the Music Industry stuff. It's kind of like a Jeff Rosenstock staple at this point to have these huge anthemic choruses. I mean, Chris's music has some of that as well, but I think lyrically speaking, you're rarely going to get anything particularly deep on here. And as you said, Alex, it's a very instantly accessible album. It's so instantaneous and punchy, and I think that's also the case with the relatability of the lyrics here. Not to say the lyrics are generic or anything. There's a lot of really amusing and sort of eyebrow-raising moments on the album. There's one that I want to mention in particular. It's not necessarily my favorite track on here, but there's a track that's really amusingly titled The Price is Right theme song. In that song, Chris essentially sings about wondering what the last song you're going to hear before you die is. And he sings about being in a hospital bed, knowing that he's going to die that night. And it all builds up to this huge anthemic chorus where it's revealed that he hears the Price is Right theme song as he dies. Which is kind of an outlier thematically. I don't know if thematically is the right word. It's kind of a jokey song, but, you know, with a concept to it. Most of the songs on here are related to the title. They're all love songs, basically, but they're all love songs in this context of the modern world that people, even in 2018, still haven't 100% sort of grasped. As complicated as human emotions are already, it's almost as if it's become more complicated by the advent of the internet, even though that causes new problems like distance and all sorts of other things, online personas, whatever. So I really enjoy the lyrical side of the album, but I will admit that it is very simple. But it works. It works for the album.
There's one lyrical theme that I kind of noticed. I wanted to run by and see if either of you guys noticed it. That ran through, I'd say, the majority of these songs. A lot of these songs, like you say, are all love songs, but I noticed a running trend that I don't know who wrote the lyrics, but I'm going to say it's
a collaborative effort. They both conceive the songs fully. It's just I'm not sure what instruments they play or anything like that.
So, like I say, these are all love songs, and lyrically, okay, we'll say the protagonist, because I doubt these are like true to form reflections of Chris Farren's love life, but regardless, he seems to depict himself, this protagonist, as a really flawed character. Like, here we have Kimmy, who he admits that he's really flawed, and he just wants to convince Kimmy she'll want him around. And I mean, in other songs, he does similar things where he just really, really deep admissions. I don't know if they're that deep because like they're bookmarked by like jokey songs like the Price is Right theme song, which I actually wasn't too sure if I liked to begin with, but I don't know, it won me over by the end, but like So Vivid is like it's really emotional, crushing in a way.
So Vivid is probably my favorite track here. It's just wonderful.
Yeah. So this lyrical theme of him being flawed, I feel like he just wanted to leave a message, no need to call back. The way he just suddenly says bye-bye at the end, it's a song of desperation.
I love the conviction, but I also love that, like you said, you were like kind of vaguely trying to tie together the lyrics, but I think that's why it works. It's the same way why a lot of pop music works. And this is why I said it's closer to Chris's material, because this is the type of music that Chris tends to write. Whereas Jeff, I think, tells more detailed stories that feel like they're definitely from his point of view, even though you can still project your own views onto them.
What I liked about the lyrics, and again, like I haven't gone, intensely deep into them to see, if there is a theme. Like, I mean, it's obviously, like you said, love songs with a modern perspective. I just love it. They feel like kind of right in between, like what Alex was saying, like of simple lyrics and being, what do you call, like more hyper literate lyrics, like the kind of stuff you would expect from like Belle and Sebastian or Death Cab for Cutie in their prime.
Right. Lots of metaphors.
Yeah, lots of metaphors, lots of like really specific ideas, like, Breathless on DVD. That's something that stood out to me. And then like I was reading a professional review of this, and like at first I thought it was the Godard film that he was talking about, but then the review pointed out it doesn't say if it's the classic or if it's the Richard Gere movie, which I've never heard of. So it's like if that was intentional, then yeah, that's some really interesting ambiguity.
You're talking about the I wanted to see you to see if I still wanted to see you quote.
Yeah, that song, and that is a great... Wait, are we thinking of the same one?
Breathless on DVD, that is the song that references that.
Yeah, that one. I do love that quote. That's like one of my favorite lines. It kind of feels like the indie rock world's version, or like the inverse of Before You Came Into My Life, I Missed You So Bad from Call Me Maybe.
Oh, yeah.
Like, for some reason, that's just like the first thing I thought of. Like other metaphors that like kind of circle around themselves and don't make sense if you think about them too hard, but if you just take them at face value, then it still works.
I hate that you just mentioned a Carly Rae Jepsen song, because now all I can think about is Carly Rae Jepsen, and I need to focus on Antarctigo.
Sorry, guys.
Seeing as you were talking about Breathless on DVD, I just want to mention something about that track. Not so much lyrically, but musically. When the chorus came in, I was really surprised, because that's kind of the first moment on the album. It's track 4, where the thing I mentioned before of them delving into genres that they might not go into on their solo work or even on their older bands. The chorus on Breathless on DVD really reminds me of Tom Tom Club. I don't know if you guys have heard that band.
I recall some hits.
It's kind of a spin-off of Talking Heads, but it's a lot more sort of poppy and accessible.
Yeah, Genius of Love.
Yeah, Genius of Love's their most well-known song. But the kind of bleepy bloopy synths and just the way the chorus flows, the way it's structured. Really great performance from Chris as well. I can't stress that enough. I think the conviction is really what sells a lot of these lyrics, even when they get a bit askewed or a bit too silly or a bit too basic. Chris's performance really ties it together. But Breathless on DVD, it's a track that you could never hear on either of these guys' solo material. You can only hear it on this album, which is just great.
It is great, and it's funny you mention a Tom Tom Club. This is maybe a little bit weird, like going into like stuff this reminded me of, but this was very like Pinkerton era Weezer to me. Breathless on DVD.
Yeah.
Like, especially the lyric, why did I crumble at the thought of you last night? That line.
It's very, very Pinkerton.
Yeah, like I thought, the first time I listened through this, I kind of thought this is like if Weezer took like the raw introspection of Pinkerton and just like filtered it through The Green album.
Yeah.
Only like with a lot more details, a lot more extra instruments.
I think it's like if they took Pinkerton and filtered it through a more emotionally mature mindset. Because even though we're making comparisons to Pinkerton here, I think I speak for all of us when I say this is not as questionable an album as Pinkerton in terms of the kind of messages that it's trying to get across. Because obviously, I love Pinkerton. I'm sure you guys do as well.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
You can tell that album was written by a very, very young guy who was kind of yet to develop much of a sense of the world outside of himself. And I think what makes Jeff Rosenstock's music so great, and also Chris Farren's, and of course Antarctigo, is there's an emotional maturity there that you don't really get from old Weezer stuff. And also production quality, not to diss those early Weezer records, but this is an album that came out in 2018 and it's power pop and it's great. There's not really much power pop out there right now. I mean, I guess you could say that about a lot of subgenres of rock. So I'm just really happy to get this record. But yeah. I just wanted to clarify, like, it's not a comparison to Pinkerton in that sense. It's more musically.
Yeah.
It's more musically, and like some of the emotional like qualities reminded me of it, especially like vocal similarities. Mm-hmm. It's mostly on that song.
I think So Vivid is the most emotionally compelling song on the album, and also it's kind of the centerpiece, but I think the centerpiece is kind of a two-part centerpiece, if that makes any sense, because you have the track So Vivid, and then you immediately follow it up with the second single from the album, Freaking You Out. I love the way these two tracks complement each other, because when I heard Freaking You Out, the single, I thought, this is going to be the opener to the whole album. But it isn't really. It actually kind of bookends the first half of the album, which is quite an interesting choice. But when you listen to it in context, it really makes a lot of sense, because you have So Vivid, which is this huge, almost like a wall of sound. It's probably the loudest song on the album consistently.
Yeah.
And then you immediately follow it up with this track that is kind of a slow build up to a big anthemic chorus. And I just think it works really well, because I think So Vivid it's a very focused song in the sense that the lyrics are way more detailed than anything else on here. And then it's almost like Freaking You Out is the culmination of that, the payoff to it, the aftermath, where the lyrics aren't detailed at all. They're actually very, very simplistic, but in a good way, because it suits the song. It's a more musically driven song, a more instrumentally driven song, and probably another one of my favorites on here.
Yeah, the fact that it's so simple lyrically, Freaking You Out, is why I'm actually maybe not redacting my failed attempt at a lyrical analysis earlier, but I love the way how Freaking You Out like opens, like out of the chaos, how So Vivid ends.
Yeah, through all that feedback.
Yeah, and then just the opening guitar of Freaking You Out just emerges from that. Such great sequencing on the album. And I feel like Freaking You Out has the strongest components of what I'd call Jeff's songwriting. Like, this is similar to stuff like Wave Goodbye to Me from Worry, especially in his guitar. Maybe not, but I felt like that.
No, that's an interesting comparison, actually. I never really thought of it, like, compared to, say, Wave Goodnight to Me. But rhythmically, I think it's quite a similar track. You can tell it's definitely Jeff playing guitar on that track, although there's three separate layers of guitars, so who knows who was playing which.
Yeah, Chris properly, like, goes all out in that song, and it's probably because he's, like, co-son with Jeff, like, co-lead vocals with each other the whole way through.
Yeah. Well, this is probably where I should mention my little theory that Chris Farren sings lead vocal on this album kind of by design, because when I saw Chris and Jeff live, I noticed that Chris Farren had to play with a capo on his guitar, like quite high up the neck. And to anyone who doesn't really understand music theory, I'll try and keep this simple, but Chris Farren obviously sings in a very high register, like higher than most singers, and certainly higher than Jeff, who sings quite high as is. But I think their vocal strengths, while great on their own, don't really go insanely well together. And in terms of fitting into the key of a song, that's why you're not getting, Chris and Jeff trading verses in the same way that LP and Mike from Run the Jewels will be. Not that that's a very apt comparison given that Run the Jewels are a rap group, but I think they really let Chris take the reins on the vocals because that consistency couldn't be achieved without it. The album maybe might feel a bit more jumbled. But there are moments on the album where Jeff sings, and the reason I sort of thought maybe this is why they're doing it is because Jeff comes up on a track in the second half of the album. I think it is All These Nights, where he actually has a full verse, but he sings in a slightly different tone than you'll hear on any of his solo material.
Yeah, it's like properly deadpan in a way.
I can't tell if it's been affected with some kind of auto-tune or something, and that's not an accusation, it's just... it seems like he had to sing in that register, even though it's not his best strength, because that's the only way it could have fit together with Chris's. Whenever I hear Jeff in the backing vocals, he's a bit more buried than I would normally expect from a backing vocal.
When I was listening to Freaking You Out, to me it seemed like really intentionally dark lyrics, kind of masked by the standard power pop sound of the album. It's like, my fingernails are falling off, I was trapped in hell and I clawed my way out. If you take that on its own, it sounds really dark, and then it kind of makes the big powerhouse chorus of I hope I'm not freaking you out seem kind of like...
Yeah.
Like the character is lacking self-awareness, but the writers are aware that it's supposed to be kind of funny. But if you take it in conjunction with the first verse, if you think of it's like, there goes my head up in the clouds every time I hear your name out loud, then it's like hearing her name kind of sends him into an emotional tailspin. And so it's like maybe he's trying to reconnect with her.
The fingernails line, I didn't even notice that. Like, that's crazy.
I don't know. I feel I could be, reading too much into this or taking it in my own direction because, like, what he was saying about Pinkerton, I had to stop myself from interrupting because I feel like that's more of a situation where the writer is aware that everything that they're saying is like insanely creepy and immature.
Yeah.
But they're writing it all anyway, and then the character is the immature one.
Yes, absolutely.
Like, that's what people seem to say about, like, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, which I can't stand. It's also how I feel about The Wall, which a lot of people these days can't stand. They hear
it's not
that it's
best.
Just like... Yeah, like, I interpret all these things differently, so maybe I'm, like, projecting a little too much.
I think lyrically the album is, like I said, it's vague enough for you to project anything onto.
Yeah.
But it's also focused enough to have purpose and to have conviction.
Yeah.
Definitely.
As far as Freaking You Out, I know we've spoken about this song disproportionately to some of the others, especially in the second track. But lyrically, I kind of did see it more how Cam describes it, because the song's lyric really does make the guy sound like problematic and crazy, and the chorus does kind of reflect that. And honestly, the song sounds as crazy as like the lyrics make the guy sound.
We could talk about Freaking You Out all day. It's a really fantastic track.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I just want to say quickly, if you've not heard of Antarctigo Vespucci and you want to check them out, that is a really great track to start out with, because there's a pretty damn funny music video.
Yeah, the music video is amazing. That's like, that drew me into the band.
One of the things that Jeff and Chris really have most in common is their sense of humor, and the music video for Freaking You Out kind of depicts Antarctigo Vespucci as being a band who've been active for 100 years. And they kind of go through this little montage of images like meeting at the White House with JFK and just all sorts of nonsense where Jeff and Chris have photoshopped their faces into these iconic images. And it's just really funny. Other stuff happens in the video, but I won't spoil it.
Yeah, definitely check out the video.
I think this album, as we've mentioned, it's got a lot of great power pop on it, but I think in the second half, after Freaking You Out, they make a conscious effort to kind of get away from that a little bit. There's still a lot of the same elements, but I think what really surprised me about this album was the direction it went in a lot of places. I mean, first off, it's bookended by these two really short, really sweet little tracks that Chris sings on, and they're both under 2 minutes long, under 1 minute 40, in fact. And I think Voicemail is a really great way to open the album and set up all the themes of the album in a really succinct way.
I'm not actually convinced that Jeff is on either of those tracks. To me, they sound like demos that Chris sent to Jeff. Maybe I'm completely wrong, and then they kind of left us like lo-fi end and start to the album, especially Email, because we can hear actually at the end of it him like get up from the his seat, I guess, to turn the recorder off.
Yeah, neutral Milk Hotel style. You could be right about that, although the synths on the track kind of remind me of the synth interludes on the first and last track from Post.
True, I could be completely wrong here, but
I feel like maybe there might be something else to interpret or read too far into with the fact that it's bookended by Voicemail and Email. Like, if you really wanted to, you could probably stretch something out about there about how it's like, you know, the advancing of the years and technology and stuff like that, or it could just be a random idea they had that they decided to put on the album.
you could definitely do that, especially because of Breathless on DVDs talking about a girl he remembers in 2009. So you could definitely look at like time lapse between different eras of time, but like you say, Cam, that's probably reading too much into it.
On Voicemail, he mentions he should just call this person, but he won't. And on Email, I've got to be honest, I'm struggling to remember many of the lyrics from Email, but I do remember it being really quite sad, like a really downbeat ending to the album, and that also ties in with the second to last track, Lifelike. And what I was saying about them taking things in different directions, there's a few cases like, is it called Not Yours or is it Do It Over? Anyway, one of those tracks. I really got kind of a Replacements vibe from that song.
I think it might be Do It Over. That was like one I thought was really jangle pop.
Yeah, Do It Over. I really got... I don't know if you guys have heard the Replacements.
I love them.
Great band, really great band. They have kind of a rockabilly tinge to their music.
Yeah.
They're a nice predecessor to this kind of power pop stuff, actually. So maybe it was a direct influence. And, you know, I think tracks like that are pretty good. You know, but the fact that I can't even remember which song that was is quite telling. I think in the second half, there's a few tracks where it's like, I enjoy them while they're on, but they're not really going to stick with me in any big way. They just have a nice chorus, nice instrumental. So I'm glad they made a conscious effort to bring in these other influences and go in different directions, so it's not just a rehash, a weaker rehash of what was going on in the first half of the album.
They're like a completely different feel, the first and second half. Honestly, the first half seems like completely energetic, visceral music, and then the second half, okay, there is some upbeat moments, yes, but it feels like a alternate, maybe like, no. Here's the thing, maybe I shouldn't say this as like, because it is the second half of the album, it's not like a breather, but it feels like a more reflective, melancholic, like just more subdued version of the same type of vibe they were going for at the first half, which is completely fine. I mean, maybe some days I'll be more into the second half. Actually, on my third listen of the album, I actually liked it considerably more than my first two listens, so who knows, maybe I'll extremely like the songs more as I listen on, but yeah.
Yeah, definitely on my first listen, I was really blown away by the first half, and then the second half kind of didn't do a lot for me, and I think that's because I was so thrown off by how moody the ending of the album is. So you have the track Another Good Thing, which is quite upbeat and anthemic, but the lyrics are such a downer. Maybe this is just another good thing that happens to everyone but me. There's no catharsis in that song. It's just complete misery if we're strictly talking about the lyricism. And kind of a toxic attitude to have about how society works, how social life works, how love works. But while they're very moody, they do put across an interesting message. But I did think the track Another Good Thing was kind of a downer. And then Lifelike is a really moody ending to the album. I actually feel like they were kind of going for a Jeff Rosenstock We Begged to Explode type thing, which was the opener of Jeff's album Worry. And yet this song Lifelike is the ending. I think it really pales in comparison to that Jeff Rosenstock track, honestly, in terms of how much I enjoy it. But the way the song's structured is very similar. And it's just a very moody way to end the album. It really surprised me, and I was really thrown off on first listen, but I've come to appreciate that a lot more as I've listened further.
Okay, so I know how Email is technically the last song, but if you call that as like a coda to the album, an outro, if we say Lifelike's like the last song proper, it's amazing. Like when I used to, when Busted Speakers was last on, I commented so many times how Piano Ballads is basically half the time always the closing track, and Lifelike is another piano ballad. I mean, it's not always going to be just a solo piano ballad. Obviously, songs progress into other instruments, but man, it really is depressive, the tones of the keys. Really, really great imagery with the lyrics, like, why can't I do what all the other humans do? I mean, that's just heartbreaking lines like that.
Is that on Lifelike, or is that on Another Good Thing?
I'm pretty sure that's on Lifelike.
I think Lifelike really taps into the whole online relationship type thing by kind of highlighting the difference between how interpersonal relationships on the internet versus real life differ.
Yeah, that's where that line comes in. The why can't I do what other people do? The supposedly perfect lives they lead online. Well, it's not actually reflective of their real lives, is it? Not always.
Exactly. You know, all you have to do is watch some Black Mirror and you'll see that wall of lies crumble down before you.
Yeah, that was a great episode. I can't remember what it's called, though.
Nosedive, I think?
Yeah.
So, we've been talking about this album for quite a while. It's obvious that we really like it. I do have some criticisms. I think the simplicity of the lyrics does hold it back somewhat in places, but it also contributes to how instantaneous the album is. So I do appreciate it for that. But if I want something with a bit more meat to it in this style, I'll go for Jeff Rosenstock's Worry or any one of his albums. But in terms of how catchy it is, how energetic, there's a lot of drum machines on this album that are programmed really so tightly. But there are a few tracks I'm not keen on. I think All These Nights is okay. I think Not Yours is okay. Like, these are a few tracks in a row that I'm not super hot on. And I think if the second half of the album was as strong as the first, I would absolutely love this album. This would be one of my favorite albums of the year. But as it stands, I just think this is really great. And I really highly recommend it to anyone who's into rock music with a witty lyrical edge to it. And of course, if you're a fan of Jeff Rosenstock, which a lot of people are, or a fan of Chris Farren, which a lot of people are, and you've not heard this, what are you doing? Listen to it. It's great. Not many people have been checking this out.
I just don't think that many people know about it.
Yeah, so I hope we can really spread the word about this really enjoyable album. So do you guys have any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I would say that if I have the time to sit down and really pay attention to it and really focus on it, it could become a favorite for the year. And I really think that I could get more enthusiastic about it. Like, I don't know, I feel like a little, like power pop and any kind of rock in general are just a little too like under the radar these days to be able to broadly recommend. I would say if you want this kind of music to come back, or if you don't care and you just want something to listen to in that vein, definitely give this a try.
It's a lot more mature than what a lot of people would call power pop as well. I think a lot of people's perception of power pop and pop punk music really comes from bands like Green Day and My Chemical Romance, and that's not a slight against those bands. I personally am not huge on them at all, but that's kind of the mainstream perception of what this type of music is. And if you want to have your eyes opened a little bit more, I'd say listen to Pinkerton by Weezer, but also listen to this album and listen to Jeff Rosenstock and listen to Chris Farren, because they're really bringing a lot to the genre that, you know, we're not hearing much power pop nowadays. And if you're a fan of power pop who's listening to all the early 2000s, 90s stuff, and you haven't heard any particularly fresh albums from this genre, again, high recommendation.
Honestly, like, maybe this is being naive, but I'd honestly almost recommend this to the majority of music fans. It's just so likable and enjoyable. I've used those specific words a lot in this review, but just when I first played this album, it just instantly drew me in, and yeah, I just love it. Well, maybe love's a bit of a exaggeration. I really do like it. Yeah, the second half drags a little bit, but overall, first opening 6, maybe 7 tracks, exceptional set of songs. A few of the others at the end were pretty damn good too, so solid recommendation from me.
These hooks are going to stick with you.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us on this returning venture into bust speakers for all of us, especially for you, Cam, because you've not been on for maybe close to 2 years at this point.
Yeah, I'd love to get back into this more often with you guys.
Yeah. We're hoping to really get the ball rolling again and record a lot more reviews. So if you enjoy this, show your support, give us a like, all that stuff. We'll continue making videos regardless. We plan on reviewing Julia Holter's new album, Aviary, once we've fully digested that 2-hour-long monolith. And also Joji's new album, Ballads 1, in the near future. But for now, I'm going to say bye. This is bye from me.
Bye from me, Alex. I hope you guys enjoyed that review.
And bye from me. We'll see you next time.
What?